शुक्लांबरधरं विष्णुं शशिवर्णं चतुर्भुजं प्रसन्नवदनं ध्यायेत् सर्वविघ्नोपशान्तये अनन्तसंसारसमुद्रतार नौकायिताभ्यां गुरुभक्तिदाभ्यां वैराग्यसाम्राज्यदपूजनाभ्यां नमो नमः श्री गुरुपादुकाभ्याम् अंजनानन्दनं वीरं जानकी शोकनाशनं कपीशमक्षहन्तारं वन्दे लङ्काभयङ्करम् कृष्णाय वासुदेवाय देवकीनन्दनाय च नन्दगोपकुमाराय गोविन्दाय नमो नमः गोविन्दाय नमो नमः गोविन्दाय नमो नमः. Namaskaram all of you and welcome to the 19th session of Narayaniyam, the third part of Dasakam 15, the third and final episode on Kapila Gita. We enjoyed the Kapilavataram detailed in Dasakam 14 by Bhattadiri and followed that up during the last two sessions, namely 17th and 18th sessions, reviewing thus far 6 slokams from Dasakam 15, popularly known as Bhattadiri's summation of Kapila Gita. As previously mentioned, since Bhattadiri devoted only 10 slokas in one Dasakam, for the entire Kapila Gita, the explanations are understandably brief. Although he summarized the essence of 397 slokas of Srimad Bhagavatam detailed in 8 chapters of Canto 3, highlighting both Sankhya Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. These teachings, known as Kapilobadesha, the core of Bhagavata Mahapuranam, Lord Kapila addresses all the generations, offering instructions to follow in all yugas, knowing full well that human race would be oppressed by the threefold miseries of samsara, and gives the essence of Sankhya and Bhakti Yogas using the rules of responding to questions of his mother, Devahuti. We stopped at Narayana Bhattadiri's lamentation on the utter ignorance of avaricious and selfish humans. Agaga bahula himsa sanchitattai kutumbam. Agaga bahula himsa sanchitattai kutumbam. Pratidinam anupushnan srijito balalani. Srijito balalani. Vishati grihasakto yatanam maya bhaktaha. Vishati grihasakto yatanam maya bhaktaha. Kapila tanuriditva devabuddhi nyagati. Bhattadiri laments, Ahaha bahula himsa sanchitartai kutumbam pratidinam anupushnan srijito balalali vishatihi grihasakto yatanam maya bhaktaha kapila tanurititvam devahuddhi negadihi. Those foolish and ignorant householders who consider the perishable and transient body as eternal wealth as permanent, mistake indulgence in several pleasures, which are the sole cause for misery and unhappiness, for real happiness, and consequently do not devote even a moment to worship me, will thereby inevitably fall into the frightful and agonizing hell. And not having an iota of devotion in the supreme bliss, become involved and immersed in home, wife, children, and as such, he looks after his near and dear ones with the wealth he has earned by illegal and immoral means, deceiving, harming, and harassing others. After 450 years of Bhattadri's lamentation, when you think of the pitiable state of affairs that many of us who are genuinely concerned are able to watch right in front of our eyes, with most of the human race falling for such utter selfish behavior, in some respects, the person who commits all this does not do it for the family or anybody else, and for that person, what matters is only himself and himself. I feel strongly that Bhattadri may have been influenced not only by Bhagavatam but also Mahabharatam, especially Santi Parva, for the above critical sentiment. As many of you may be aware, Shanti Parva is a treatise on duties of a king and his government, dharma, namely laws and rules, proper governance, rights, justice, and describe how these create prosperity. This magnificent work is now agreed between global scholars as a living work belonging to some 3000 years before Common Era, which would place it some 5000 years before today. The one and only comprehensive work on Rajaniti and governance, codes and laws, etc. Of all the 18 parvas of the Mahabharatam, Shanti Parva is the most enormous or voluminous one. It further has three sub-parvas, namely Rajadharma Anushasana Parva, Apad Dharma Parva, and Moksha Dharma Parva. Together, total of 13,716 slokas classified within 365 chapters in one parva, namely Shanti Parva. Yaccha kamasukam loke yaccha divyam mahatsukam trishnakshaya sukashyaite narhataha shodashim kalam. Devoid of any awareness of what is good for oneself and any iota of devotion for the supreme bliss, this wicked human in the end meets his deserved result. That is, according to Bhattadri and also the great acharyas before him, they all come to only one conclusion, that this human falls into Raurava, Maharaurava, and other unimaginable hells commensurate with one's sinful deeds, and also experiences endless and acute misery and pain in the process. This is the statement found in second chapter of the English translation of Mahavastu, otherwise known as Great Story, which dates back to the 2nd century before Common Era. This work belongs to the Mahasanghika school of early Buddhism and contains narrative stories of the Buddha's former lives, such as Apadhana, Jataka, and Pitaka. They draw parallels from Mahabharatam. Thus, Bhattadri concludes the sloka 6 with the above sentiment, Vishatihi grihashakto yatanam mayya bhaktaha kapilatanurititvam devahudyai negadihi. You thought this way to your mother Devahuti in your incarnation as Lord Kapila. Bhattadri signifies by the words ahaha, which is an expression for alas. His sadness at the wicked course followed by the ignorant and the foolish, forsaking the very exhilarating yet easy path of devotion, leading to final supreme blessedness. Why did he feel so desperate for the ignorant humans of that basal nature? It's pretty simple. The course of fall into hell of such persons is stated in the Bhagavatam and more elaborately Garuda Purana as follows. There are 8.4 million types of hells mentioned in Garuda Puranam, and 28 of those as distinct kinds of hell often referred to and commonly talked about. Selfish humans are admitted to one or the other of these 28 hells according to their past evil deeds and are punished right therein. As you may be aware, Garuda Purana was so named as it was Lord Mahavishnu who gave the account as instructions and answers to Garuda, who sought for above such education. பிறந்த ஜீவன் பாவ கர்ம பலனாக விதவிதமான நரகங்களை அடைவதை பற்றி விவரணமாக சொல்லுவதுதான் கருட புராணம். இது மகாவிஷ்ணுவால் தன்னுடைய சீடனான கருடனுக்கு சொல்லப்பட்டது. யமதூதைஹி யாதனா ஸ்ரீரம் நீத்வா பாசைஹி கலேபத்வ ஆகிருஷ்ய திரிபிஹி மூர்த்தைஹி நவநவதி சகஸ்ரயோஜன தூரே யமசதனம் பிராபிதோ அஷ்டாவிம்சதி கோடி நரகபேதான் பாபதாரதம்யேன அனுபூய அனந்தரம் திருநாதிஷு விம்சதி லட்சம் ஜன்மானி அவாப்பிய ஜலஜந்துஷு நவலட்சம் கிருமிஜாதிஷு ஏகாதச லட்சம் பக்ஷிஜாதிஷு தசலட்சம் சதுஷ்பாதிஷாதிஷு சப்தகோடி ஜன்மானி ச அவாப்பிய அனந்தரம் மனுஷ்யஜாதிஷு சதுர்லக்ஷம் பிராமணஜாதிஷு ஹீனமத்யோத்தமதயா பதம் ச ஜன்மானி அவாப்பிய தத்ர புனரபி பாபகிருச்சேன் நரகேஷு பததி. This is a statement in Garuda Purana about how people fall into various types of hells. Thereafter, the sinner has to experience the fruits of his sins by repeated births. 1.1 million times in the vegetable world. I'm converting all lakhs into millions for easy reference for most of you. So in the vegetable world alone, we need to take rebirths 1.1 million times. 0.9 million times as creatures of the ocean. In other words, 9 lakhs or 900,000. 1.1 million times as worms. 1 million times as birds. 70 million times as animals. And finally, as humans of some minimal or absolutely minimal intelligence. Only thereafter, thanks to some consistent meritorious deed or the other that the human might perform, one is born as an evolved human being, and even then, it takes several birth-death cycles for him to evolve into the highest stage of development, namely, to aim towards being a self-realized person. Should he then become a sinner again, after all the process, he once again falls into the hell and has to undergo the previously mentioned long cycle all over again. Kapila Tanurititvam Devahudi Negadihi. This is what you explained your mother, Devahudi, in your incarnation as Lord Kapila. Shrotrasya Shrotram Manaso Mano Yadvachoha Vachamsa Upranasya Pranaha Shakchushas Chashuhu Atimuchya Diraha Prityaha Asmal Logad Amrita Bhavanti. The last session also raised a few questions. For those of you who attended and wondered the purport of the Kenopanishad Vakyam which I just now quoted, what does it mean? Just a repeat of abstracts? No, that it is Brahman. I also tried to give some explanation as to what is year of the year, mind of the mind, with some examples. But this time I will amplify it further. When sadhana leads you to the realization that the true nature of the rope can be realized through the negation of the illusions of a snake, what does it mean? Oftentimes, we see a rope from at a distance and try to come to a conclusion that it may be a snake because it's in our mind that we see the rope as snake. But only after you make certain effort and come to the conclusion by negation that it cannot be a snake, then you finally understand it is rope. So the very self, subsisting usually in the three states, namely Jagrat, Swapna, Shushupti, is sought to be established as Turiya. Turiya is the fourth, in the same way as is understood in the case of the profound phrase Tattvamasi, which is Chandogya Upanishad, that thou art. Since everyone uses this small phrase Tattvamasi most of the time without going into the full verse or explaining the ambit or purport, let us see at least the context and the genesis of this Tattvamasi. स येषो अणिमयितद् आत्म्यमिदं सर्वं तत् सत्यं स आत्मा तत्त्वमसि श्वेतकेतो इति भूय एव मा भगवान् विज्ञापयत्व इति तथा सौम्येति होवाच. So the first statement was that which is the subtlest of all is the self of all of this, O Swetaketu. Then Swetaketu asked the Guru Uddalaka, Sir, please explain this to me again, because I am confused. Uddalaka and Swetaketu, the relationship is father and son. So the father explains to the son, who happens to be the disciple also. Chandogya is in the form of dialogues between Uddalaka, also known as Aruni, and his son Swetaketu. This positive statement, Tattvamasi, is interpreted not literally, but figuratively to mean that thou, which is the individual soul, is identical with that which is Brahman. Once again, thou here is the individual Jivatman, we call it, or individual soul, and that is identical with that which is Brahman or Atman. When both are bereft of conditioning factors, again we have to remember, not in abstract terms, it's in a continuum. The thou and that are spoken in the context when both are bereft of conditioning factors. Because one is in the other, because there are no conditioning factors separating the thou and that. Since I am aware of my inadequacy of the knowledge of Vedanta, it is better to clarify any inadvertent misconception that the above interpretation as conscious Advaita amplifications or Advaitic amplification or interpretation. Let us therefore see the other available or possible interpretations of the same phrase Tattvamasi in different forms of philosophy. As you all know, Advaita is absolute equality of Tat, the ultimate reality, Brahman, and Tvam, the self, namely Atman. Advaita is absolute equality of Tat, the ultimate reality, Brahman, and Tvam, the self, namely Atman. Shuddha Advaita is oneness in essence between Tat and individual self. But Tat is the whole and self Tvam is a part. Vishitta Advaita, identity of individual Tvam, namely self, as a part of the whole, which is Tat, namely Brahman. Dvaita Advaita is another philosophy. Equal non-difference and difference between the individual self as a part of the whole, which is Tat again. Dvaita of Madhvacharya is Sa Atma Tattvamasi. Sa Atma Tattvamasi. In Sanskrit, is actually Sa Atma Tattvamasi. Or Atma, the soul, the what, thou art not God. In refutation of Mayavada, refers to doctrine of illusion. Mayavada Satadushini, text 6 says, Tattvamasi is translated as, you are a servant of the Supreme Brahman. Achintya Beda Abeda. In other words, it's known as Achintya Beda Beda. Inconceivable oneness and difference between individual self as a part of the whole, which is Tat. Akshara Purushottama Upasana. Oneness of the individual self, Atman, with Akshara Brahman, while worshipping Purushottama, namely God, as a supreme and separate entity. Coming back to Kenopanishad, which is the second most important Muktika of 108 Upanishad, it is in the last section of Talavakara Upanishad Brahmana or Jaiminiya Upanishad Brahmana of the Shaka of Samaveda. In this Samavedam between the teacher and the student, Rishi, the teacher or Guru, was questioned by the student on the very same question I referred to earlier. How can ear from ear and eye from eye, etc., make sense? The answer is Shrotesha Shrotam Manaso Mano Yadvachoha Vachumsha Upranasya Pranaha. The teacher then asked the student to get him some water. Because all the profound statements have been said, we are given enough meanings of that. But when you really break them up into fundamental practicality, let us go by the explanations given by great acharyas. The teacher asked the student to get him some water. The student took a pot, went to the river, and returned with the water. The teacher, namely the Rishi, said, "Who told you to bring the pot? I only wanted you to bring water. So therefore go, bring only water and nothing else." The perplexed student tells the Acharya, "Oh master, how can I bring water without a pot or without a container?" Then the teacher or the Rishis said, "Therefore, as you can see, as I can see, and as everybody else can see here, some instrument or medium or container is necessary in order to bring home the object of the exercise, namely water here. Is it not? So water by itself you cannot bring. You have to bring it in a pot or a container or even a leaf. So it is necessary that a medium is required to bring home the object of the exercise. So your body and mind are the instruments. You are not your body and what you think of yourself to be. In other words, you are not your body and what you think yourself to be. You are the instrument, but by you, I mean not you. I mean that which you cannot define. The Rishi then explains the profound concept of Deham, Naham, Koham, and Soham. Deham, Naham, Koham, Soham. What is this? Play of words? No. Deham, I am not the body. I am not the body, namely Deham, and neither the thoughts that I think. Koham. If I am not the body, then who am I? Soham. I am that. I am not my own imagination. I am not who I imagine myself to be. I am that being which cannot be grasped by even the mind. That being is the eye of the eye, ear of the ear, the mind of the mind, which I mentioned earlier. The wise men give up in the pursuit of knowing the I. This is most important. Let us see an anecdote in the life of Bhagavan Ramana. Ramana Maharshi met with two little girls the father brought, and the younger one was very mischievous, if not precocious. The 5-year-old was jumpy all the time, if not hyperactive. In today's world, they have a name for it. And some in the audience raised the usual question, how to be calm and remain just as it is, not like this child, which we call Summa in Tamil. Summa irupadu eppadi என்று சிலர் ரமண மகரிஷியை பார்க்க வந்த பக்தர்கள் ரமணரை கேட்கிறார்கள். இந்த குழந்தை போல் மேலும் கீழும் ஏறி ஓடி இறங்காமல் எப்படி அமைதியாக சும்மா இருப்பது? அமைதியாக என்று கூட கேட்கவில்லை, சும்மா இருப்பது எப்படி? இந்த சும்மா என்கிற வார்த்தையை நீங்கள் அனைவரும் கேள்விப்பட்டிருப்பீர்கள். அருணகிரிநாதர் said in கந்தர் அனுபூதி, செம்மான் மகளை திருடும் திருடன் பெம்மான் முருகன் பிறவான் இரவான் சும்மா இரு சொல்லற என்றலுமே அம்மா பொருள் ஒன்றும் அறிந்திலனே என்றார் கந்தர் அனுபூதியில். Remaining silent is not சும்மா இருத்தல். Since the silent man could not be more agitated inside than a verbal brat if the mind has multiple channels running without any control whatsoever. Bhagavan Ramana laughed And instead of answering the bhaktas about the question of Summa, he looked at the jumpy girl and asked with a friendly smile, "Ingava, beautiful, you are wearing a very nice skirt. Is it you? You are wearing very nice golden bangles. Is it you?" The child gave a very strange look at Ramana and in an admonishing tone said, "Don't you know that? No. The nice skirt is not me. The nice golden bangles are not me. They are not I. They are only mine. நான் அவைகள் அல்ல, அவை என்னுடையவை. இந்த குழந்தை சொல்லுகிறது பகவான் ரமணரிடம், நான் அணியும் உடையோ, நான் அணியும் தங்க வளையல்களோ என்னுடையவை, அவைகள் நான் அல்ல என்கிறது அந்த 5 வயது குழந்தையும் ரமண மகரிஷியிடம். இப்போது ரமண மகரிஷி அனைவரும் சுற்றி பார்க்கிறார். Looking around, Bhagavan Ramana says, like what she said, even this body is not you. It may be yours for some time. Then, koham, who am I? If body is not me, who am I? Soham, I am Shiva. Soham, Shivoham, I am the heart. This is how Bhagavan Ramana explains koham, soham, and Shivoham. That takes me to the next question. When does someone give up something? Answer: when one understands there is no value left in the pursuit of something. Here, the Rishi is referring to something which cannot be grasped or touched by the senses, which cannot be referred to, which is beyond the scope of human understanding. From the time you are born, parents gave you a name, and everyone around addresses you by that name only. As you grow, teachers and friends address you by that name. Then you become an engineer, a doctor, a scientist, a writer, or whatever. Note that as you grow, you keep adding more and more and more of your qualifications, attributes, and parameters, and come to strongly believe that those are your actual identities. Namely, your qualification is your identity, your attribute is your identity, your parameters are your identity. The titles you have earned are your identities. Are they? These are all descriptions of you, just to describe who you are. But it is not you. What you are referring to now is the pot, not the water. You remember we talked about pot and water when the teacher said, "Go bring water"? Here, all the descriptions and qualifications and attributes and parameters all refer to the pot, not the water. What you refer to is your nice dress and ornaments that you wear and not you. Sadly, I had to use finally the anecdote that I may have said earlier, elsewhere. As long as the near and dear one is struggling for the last breath on his or her exquisite bed in her or his palatial mansion, surrounded by a dozen closest of relatives and hundreds of his or her admirers in and around the home, anxiously waiting for the message, he or she has a name. The fame gathered over decades and titles conferred to that person through which that person is referred to as doctor, sir, the great master, etc., etc. The minute the doctor drops the hand of the person lying down and declares the stoppage of the nadi or pulse, saying, "Well, nothing," there is hurried discussion as to the next steps between all the relatives who had surrounded this person who is on bed. The declaration comes from the doctor, then everyone else starts scrambling for what are the next steps to be taken. In an hour or less, the body is kept outside, not the person, not Dr. So-and-so, not Sir So-and-so. The body is kept outside and referred to as it. They are no longer referring to him or her. Let us reverse the thought process. The body was misunderstood to be it, but the breath or soul was the thou, and the Atman which left and coalesced with that, thou became that in the true sense of the term. Another satsangi raised the next question. Well, you explained the three states, Jagrat, Swapna, Sushupti, but you also mentioned something about Turiya while referring these two Upanishads, one trying to explain the other. What is Turiya or who is Turiya? The term that I mentioned last session in the context of Mandukya Upanishad. I said, na antapragyam, na bahishpragyam, no bhayata pragyam, na pragyana ghanam, na pragyam, na pragyam, adrishtam, avyaharyam, agrahyam, malakshanam, achintyam, avyapadesham, ekatma pratyasaram, prapancha upashamam, shantam, shivam, advaitam, chaturtam, manyante sa atmasa, vijñeyaha. Turiya, the short form of Chaturiya. Turiya is the shorter form of Chaturiya, or the fourth state, and that is the state in which the individual soul rests in his own Sat-Chit Ananda Swarupa, or the highest Brahmic consciousness during Nirvikalpa Samadhi. The individual soul resting in his own Satchidananda Swarupa, especially the highest consciousness during Nirvikalpa Samadhi. There are three states, Jagrat, Swapna and Sushupti we talked about for a jiva who is whirling in the mire of samsara, in the births and deaths which we talked about. And that is what was explained as the tenant falling into the perpetual illusion that it is he or she is the owner of this jiva. It's just a tenant. My own, my home, my spouse, my children, on and on and on. This is the illusion of the tenant about the jiva. Turiya is that state which transcends all these three states. Hence, the Turiya or Chaturiya, the fourth as we call. What is Turiya? Turiya is Atman or Brahman, the ultimate consciousness, which is Brahman. All the discussions between Kapila and Devahuti and subsequent Samvadam between Krishna and Arjuna on the same subject in Sankhya Yoga, Maitreya and Vidura, Sukha and Parikshit as retelling of Vedavyasa's Srimad Bhagavatam are all focused on this aspect of reaching the ultimate state, namely the Turiya. Ramana Maharshi was asked on this question again of Turiya as well by one of the devotees. Bhagavan Ramana opined, Turiya is the state of wakeful sleep. Wakeful sleep. It is the fourth state of consciousness, which is the highest or pure consciousness. It is the state of union also referred to as conscious samadhi. Turiya can be experienced by yogis through the practice of asana and meditation. The four states of consciousness are Jagrat, Swapna, Sushupti, and Turiya. Jagrat is waking consciousness, Swapna is the dream consciousness, Sushupti is the deep sleep consciousness, and Turiya is the highest consciousness, which is beyond all the three previous states undergone by this suffering soul. Entering state of Turiya requires inner silence. It can be achieved when the mind is free of mental blocks and bondages with the time and space. Let's watch it closely. The goal of yoga and meditation is to achieve Turiya, where oneness is felt with the universe, cosmos, or creation, and finally, Brahman. In context, I've been reading a book titled Pranidhana, recently published by the Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram in India. This book is the first of its kind, also the first segment of the English translation of the Yogavalli by Sri Sridharan, a senior mentor and yoga therapist and former managing trustee of Yoga Mandiram. Sridharan commences the book by writing, Yoga means dhyana, which in fact is the cause of attaining the ultimate state of samadhi. Ishvara Pranidhana, or surrendering to the Lord Supreme, is the only way to attain samadhi. Dhyana involves recalling the form of the Lord in idols as if one is seeing the Supreme Brahman in person through the idol. This is very simplistic, but if you just focus on this, you will understand that all this philosophy can be reduced to simple terms. Towards the end of the book, Pranidhana, Sri Sridharan summarizes the purpose as follows. This is what I have gathered from the book because I'm almost close to the end. He says only a meditator whose mind is not overpowered by rajas and tamas will be capable of perceiving the gross and subtle forms of the object of meditation in the four types of samadhi which we discussed now. The form of the dhyaya is object of meditation, namely Paramatma, is subtle, that is Karana, and also gross, namely Karya. So, Paramatma is subtle, Karana, and also gross, namely Karya. It is not made out of Prakriti and not associated with Prakriti, and it is self-luminous. To bless the meditator, the Lord assumes the subtle and gross forms by his own will. Dhyana is based on dharana. Samadhi is based on the supreme state of dhyana. Dhyana in turn resembles a lamp in a windless place. Just imagine, samadhi cannot be experienced without dhyana. Towards the end, for beginners, a form by way of idol has to be created out of mud or metal, and you start focusing on the idol as if it is Brahman, and slowly that becomes Brahman itself. Sridharan proceeds to explain his Acharya's exposition in Yogavalli as to the process of reaching that stage. I mention this to highlight that ordinary mortals can also easily attempt to enter the state of Turiya, or the fourth state called Chaturiya, but that requires inner silence. Inner silence is very tough. That can be achieved only when the mind is free of mental blocks, bondages with time and space, and also unnecessary questions whether the process will lead to Turiya. One has to believe first in order to even go through the practice. The goal of yoga and meditation is to achieve Turiya, where oneness is felt with the universe. And that is the final state, after which there is nothing. We will now see as to what happens to those who have a mixture of merits and demerits and how they tend to get deluded. How does Kapila answer Devahuti on this question as per Bhattadiri? Yuvati Jatarakinna Jata Bodhoti Akande Yuvati Jatarakinna Jata Bodhopi Akande Prasavagalita Bodhaha Prasavagalita Bodhaha Pidaya Bullangya Bhagalyam Yuvati Jatarakinna Jata Bodhopi Akande Prasavagalita Bodhaha Pidaya Bullangya Bhagalyam Punarapi Bhatamuhyati Yevatarunya Kale Punarapi Bhatamuhyati Yevatarunya Kale Kapila Danuriditvam Devahudai Nyagadi Kapila Danuriditvam Devahudai Nyagadi. Yuvati Jatarakinno Jata Bodhopi Akhande Prasavagalita Bodhaha Pidaya Ullangya Bhalyam Punarapi Bhata Mukhyati Eva Tarunya Kale Kapila Tanurititvam Devahuddi Negadihi. யுவதியான தாயின் யோனியில் வசிக்கும் போது துன்பமடைந்து அத்துன்பத்தை நீக்க இயலாத போது ஞானம் இருந்தும் கூட பிரசவ காலத்திலே அதை மறந்து அதை இழந்து பல இன்னல்களுடன் பால்யத்தை, அதாவது குழந்தை பருவத்தை கடந்து யவ்வன பருவத்தில் மறுபடியும் தற்காலிக சுகங்களால் மதிமயக்கத்தையே அடைகிறான் அல்லவா? ஐயோ, இது என்ன கஷ்டம் என்று கபிலாவதாரம் செய்த தாங்கள் தங்கள் தாயான தேவகூதிக்கு உபதேசம் செய்தீர்கள் என்று நாராயண பட்டதிரி புலம்புகிறார். Bhattadiri laments again, alas, instead of practicing devotion to the Lord while being young, which is easy, and preparing for emancipation, the young man or woman makes no such effort at all in that direction and wastes his or her life. What a pity. This follows the description of attainment of heaven and other regions of merit by those who perform meritorious actions. Yatha nadyaha shandamanaha samudrestam gachanti namarupe vihaya tata vidwan namarupad vimuktaha paratparam purusham upaiti divyam. Just as rivers flowing become lost in an ocean, giving up both their name and form, just so the knower, freed from vasanas, name and form, attains the bright Purusha which is beyond the Avyakta. If this is true, how do we cross not only the grief but also virtue and vice? In other words, our attempt should not be to cross only the grief. Our attempt should be to surpass the virtue and vice also, because only then we can feel completely free from the Hridaya Bandhanam. Good or bad, both are actually not conducive to our effort. So as to become immortal, the method is to give up everything. Sayoha vaidati paramam brahma veda brahmaiva bhavati nasya brahma vitkule bhavati tarati shokam tarati papmanam griha grantibhyo vimukto amruto bhavati. This is the 9th sloka in Mundaka, 2nd chapter in the 3rd Anuvaka. He who knows that the highest Atman becomes Brahman, and in his line, none who knows not the Brahman will be born. He crosses grief and virtue and vice and being freed from the knot of the heart. Bhattadiri then gives the greatest challenge, the cycle of birth and death and the aiding and abetting in the sloka 8. Pitrusuraganayadi Pitrusuraganayadi dharmikoyo grihastaha Pitrusuraganayadi dharmikoyo grihastaha sajani padati kale Dakshinadvo upagami Sajani padati kale Dakshinadvo upagami Mayini hitamakamam Karmadudak padartam Kapilatanurithitvam devahudyainagadi Kapilatanurithitvam devahudyainagadi Nyagadi devahudyainagadi. Pitrusuraghana yaji dharmikoyo grihastaha sacha nipatati kale dakshinodvo upagami mai nihitamakamam karmadudak padartham kabila tanurititvam devahudye negadi. பித்ருகணங்களையும் தேவகணங்களையும் பூஜித்துக் கொண்டு இல்லற தர்மத்தில் சிறிதும் நழுவாது இருப்பவனும் கூட இறந்த பிறகு தட்சிணாயன மார்க்கத்தில் சென்று செய்த புண்ணியம் குறைந்ததும் மறுபடியும் பூமியில் வந்து விழுகிறான், அதாவது பூமியில் வந்து பிறக்கிறான். என்னிடம் அர்ப்பணம் செய்யப்பட்ட பயனில் கருத்தில்லாத கர்மம், அதாவது நிஷ்காம கர்மம் செய்பவன் மட்டும்தான் உத்தராயண மார்க்கத்தில் செல்வதற்கு காரணத்தை தேடிக்கொள்ளுகிறான். அதாவது கர்மா செய்யும் பொழுது தனக்கு ஏதோ கிடைக்க வேண்டும் என்று செய்கிறவன் புண்ணியம் கிடைக்கிறது. அந்த புண்ணியத்தை செலவழித்தவன் மறுபடியும் பூமியிலேயே வந்து பிறக்கிறான். ஆனால் பயனில் எந்த கருத்துமே இல்லாமல் ஒருவன் கர்மா செய்தால், நிஷ்காம கர்மம் செய்தான் என்றால் அவன் உத்தராயண மார்க்கத்தில் என்னிடம் வந்து சேருகிறான். அதற்கு பின் அவருக்கு பிறவி இல்லை என்கிறார் என்று கபிலாவதாரம் செய்த தாங்கள் தங்கள் தாயான தேவகூதிக்கு உபதேசம் செய்தீர்கள் அல்லவா? In summary, householders given to pleasures or performing rituals seeking benefits are condemned to undergo the cycle of birth and death repeatedly. All the punyas accumulate into plus. All the papams accumulate into minus. Either way, you end up coming back by birth and death, the cycles. But only when you completely clean up the slate. That's why we do the Satvikatyam in the end of everything, Kayena Vacha. We really surrender everything to Bhagavan, even the fruits we surrender completely in a Nishkama fashion. That is how you really wash off good and bad, completely ready to be absorbed by Brahman. Householders given to pleasures or performing rituals seeking benefits, they are condemned to undergo the cycle of birth and death repeatedly. That is to say, take birth, practice virtuous actions, die, reach heaven and similar regions, enjoy pleasures there in those Swargalokams, etc., for a while and again be reborn on the earth. They keep on going in endless circles in the above manner. This is the path taken by pleasure-loving people through the performance of Kamya Karma, hankering after health, hankering after wealth, long life, progeny, name, fame, title, and social status, and everything for their children and grandchildren, etc., 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 because they are all Kamya Karmas. We perform with the desire to obtain something from the Lord Supreme. That material things can only give you material benefit, and you come back again to go through the pain. The person who practices only Kamya Karmas, after completely experiencing the effects of his predestined actions or Prarabdha Karmas, abandons his old gross body, makes his exit with his subtle body, passing through the sense organs like eyes and the like. However, the means to attain the supreme state of non-return and cut off the birth-death cycles is mentioned in the later half of the same verse we just quoted. Mayi nihitama kamam karma dudak padartham. Those virtuous persons who perform their obligatory duties unmotivated by selfish desires and also dedicate their actions to Paramatma reach Brahmaloka. Reaching Brahmaloka through the path of light, he, along with Brahma, or she, along with Brahma, attains Brahma Sayujya or salvation at the time of Mahapralaya, namely Brahma Pralaya or Prakrita Pralaya, the great dissolution. This is how you explained to your mother Devahuti in your incarnation as Kapila. And that's what Narayana Bhattadri says. I will attempt a simple practical summary of the above, which might offend a significant number of followers who either attend these sessions or watch them in the YouTube, because who believe in constantly asking for something in their prayers to their Ishta Deivam, and this may come as a surprise to them that I am mentioning this. Pardon me for that. Whatever Vyasa, Sukha, Bhattadri said and amplified is what I am trying to attempt here as summation. It's not my own creation. All our prayers and Nitya Karmanushtanams are ending up with, please give me this, please give me that, this and that and this and that again. That's how we do our prayers. Dehi, 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 Dehi. Protect me. Trahi, 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 Trahi. Save me. All sankalpams to austerities either at home or in the temple or spiritual setup or camps are more often than not aimed towards my welfare, my wife, my children, my grandchildren, my friends, my extended family, for myself, and more prayers, more yagas, more chanting, and more yajnam. All of those are unending cycles that accumulate a lot of bank balances, and all dehi are partial withdrawals from partial acquisitions. These cycles are as powerful as the cycle of births and deaths. As per Bhattadri and Shuka and Maitreya and Bhagavan Krishna, in multiple avatars, in multiple Gitas, handing out Gita after Gita only by different names, they all say the same thing. Whenever you do Kamyartha prayers, seeking benefits by Dehi and Trahi, etc., you only accumulate more and more bank balances. To spend it, you have to come back. Or once you spend it, you need to really go back. This is what is happening. Hare Krishna. How then should I stop the accumulation of good and bad, which only press me down with no end in sight? How do I get out of the concentric cycle, which is like a whirlpool, samsara? And Krishna, you are not making it easier either. Parikshit laments in desperation and reminds Shuka of Krishna's own words in Yuddhabhumi. Bhaktya mam abhijanati, bhaktya mam abhijanati, yamanyasya, bhaktya mam abhijanati, yamanyasya, asmi tattvataha, tato mam tattvato jnatva. Tato mam tattvato jnatva vishate tadanantaram. Tato mam tattvato jnatva vishate tadanantaram. Naham prakasha sarvasya naham prakasha nagam prakasha sarvasya yogamaya samavritaha mudoyam nabijanati loko mam ajamavyayava. Mudoyam nadijanati loko mam ajamavyayam. Shunvanti gayanti grananti, shunvanti gayanti grananti, abhikshanasaha abhikshnasasmaranti nandanti. Kavegitam janaha tayeva pashyanti achirena tavakam bhavapravaho paramam padambujam. Shunvanti gayanti grananti abhikshasmaranti nandanti. Kavegitam janaha tayeva pashyanti achirena tavakam bhavapravaho paramam padambujam paramo padambujam. Bhaktyamam abhijanati yavanyasya yasmi tattvataha tato mam tattvato jnatva vishade tadanantaram. You cannot understand me as Krishna and my plenary aspects of my existence, and you can never understand by mental speculation, and especially I can never be understood by the non-devotees or non-bhaktas. If anyone wants to understand me, he has to take to Shuddha Bhakti with zero material benefits back from me. Under the guidance of a pure devotee, who should be a Shuddha Bhakta, that is an Acharya who knows me and who teaches you for nothing. practically nothing. Otherwise, the truth of the Supreme Brahman will always be hidden to you forever. This is the 18th chapter, 55th sloka. Then in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7, Bhagavan Krishna says to Arjuna in a different context, Naham prakashaha sarvasya yogamaya samavrtaha mudoyam nabijanati loko mam ajamavyayam. I am never manifest to the foolish and unintelligent. For them I am covered by my internal potency, and therefore they do not know that I am unborn and infallible. Parikshit thinks he knew the sutra, but is still unclear. When Shuka comes to his rescue and gives the cue to all of us as well, he addresses Krishna, which calms down Parikshit. Shunvanti, Gayanti, Grananti, Abhishnasaha, Smaranti, Nandanti, Revehitam Janaha, Saeva Pashyanti, Achirena Tavakam, Bhavapravaho, Paramam Padambujam. O Krishna, those who continuously hear Shravanam, chant, Kirtanam, and repeat your spiritual activities or take pleasure in others doing so, certainly see your lotus feet, which alone can stop the repetition of birth and death. Bhattacharya then describes the departure of Kapila Bhagavan and the salvation of Mother Devahuti.
Iti suvidita vedyam devake devahutya. Iti suvidita vedyam devake devahutyam kritanutim anugrihya tvam gato yogi sangaihi Vimalamatiratasau Bhakti Yogena Mukta Tvamapi Janahitartam Vartase Pragudicam Vimalamatiratasau Bhakti Yogena Mukta Tvamapi Janahitartam Vartase Janahitartam Tvamapi Vartase Pragudicam
Iti suvidita vedyam devahe devahutim kritanutim anugrihya tvam gato yogi sangaihi vimalamati ratasau bhakti yogena mukta tvamapi janahitartam Vartase Pragudichyam. தேவதேவனான ஸ்ரீ குருவாயூரப்பா, இவ்வாறு அறிய வேண்டியதை நன்கு அறிந்து கொண்டு தங்களை துதித்த தங்களுடைய தாய் தேவகூதிக்கு அனுக்கிரகம் செய்துவிட்டு தாங்கள் சாது ஜனங்களுடன் கூட்டங்களுடன் புறப்பட்டு சென்று மக்களின் நலன் கருதி இப்பொழுதும் பாரத நாட்டின் வடகிழக்கில் இருக்கிறீர்கள் அல்லவா, அப்படித்தானே சொல்லிக் கொள்ளுகிறார்கள். அதன் பின் ஞான ஒளி பெற்றதால் அஞ்ஞான இருள் அகன்று தெளிவடைந்த சித்தத்துடன் தங்கள் தாயான தேவகூதி பக்தி மார்க்கத்தினால் முக்தி எய்தினாள் என்று சொல்லுகிறார்களே. தேவகூதி முக்தி அடைந்த இடம் சித்திபதம் சித்தாசிரம என்ற பெயருடன் விளங்குகிறது. அங்குதான் ஸ்ரீ வாமனமூர்த்தி அவதாரம் செய்தருளினார் என்று புராணங்கள் சொல்லுகின்றன. விஸ்வாமித்திரரும் அந்த சித்தாசிரமத்தில் தான் யாகம் செய்தார். ஸ்ரீ கபில வாசுதேவர் வடகிழக்கில் இருக்கும் இடம் கங்கா சாகரம் எனப்படுகிறது. வால்மீகி ராமாயணம் Balakanda mentions that the sons of Sagara who went in the northerly direction in Patala in search of their father's sacrificial horse met Kapila Maharishi.
Paramakimu bahudya Paramagimu bahudya Tvatpadamboja bhaktim Sakala Bhayavinetrim Sarvakamopanetrim Paramagimu bahudya Tvatpadamboja bhaktim Sakala Bhayavinetrim Sarvakamopanetrim Vadasi kaludrudam tvam Tadviduyamayanme Vadasi kaludrudam tvam Tadviduyamayanme Guru Bhavana Puresha Tvayupadasva bhakti Vadasi kaludrudam tvam Tadviduyamayanme Guru Bhavana Puresha Tvayupadasva bhaktim Tvayupadasva bhaktim
Paramakimu bahutya Tvatpadamboja bhaktim Sakala Bhaya Vinetrim Sarva Kamopanetrim Vadasi Kalu Drudam Tvam Tadvidiyumayan Me Guru Pavana Puresha Tvayubadasva bhaktim அனைத்துக்கும் மேலான பகவானே, அதிகம் பேசுவதால் என்ன லாபம்? தங்களுடைய திருவடித் தாமரைகளில் பக்தி ஒன்றே எல்லா பயங்களையும் போக்கும் என்று நாம் எல்லாம் அறிந்த விஷயம்தானே. விருப்பங்கள் அனைத்தையும் கொடுக்கும் என்று நீங்களே திடமாக சொல்லியிருக்கிறீர்கள் அல்லவா? மறுபடியும் எத்தனை கீதையில் சொல்லியிருக்கிறீர்கள். ஆகையால் ஹே குருவாயூரப்பா, உங்களிடத்தில் பக்தியை உண்டு பண்ணி தர வேண்டும். அந்த பக்தி ஒன்றே எனக்கு அளித்தால் போரும். நான் எதையுமே கேட்கவில்லை. நான் பக்தி செய்ய வேண்டும். எந்த காரணமும் இல்லாமல் உன் பதாம்புஜத்தில் பக்தி ஒன்றையே செய்ய வேண்டும் என்பதைத்தான் நான் வேண்டுகிறேன். O Lord of Guruvayur, you are apart and totally different from the 24 principles of nature and the attributes pertaining to such. There is no Purusha other than you, even though you took 22 or 24 avatars and incarnations and many more incarnations which are not numbered. Of what avail is my mere talk? You are the most glorious one. Is it not more appropriate to explain the essence of Vedas and Upanishads than indulging in a world of sound, namely mere talk? Who else can do it but you, who happens to be the universal preceptor? Bhakti, the symbol of supreme love, removes all sorrows of samsara. Moreover, it also grants all wishes, including emancipation. You have declared it so. I am not saying this afresh. So, Guruvayurappa, needless to mention that if one takes birth as a human being, the one and only thing that is necessarily to be gained is total devotion or absolute devotion to you. Nothing else matters. Of course, you all know bhakti is of two kinds, sadhana and sadhya bhakti. Sadhya bhakti is signified by love to you, is obtained easily from sadhana, which consists of doing pradakshinams, prostration, kirtanam, etc., etc. I am now afflicted both physically and mentally by ailments which do not permit me to serve you in those ways which I would love to, so that I can get Shuddha Bhakti. Normally, I would not seek any favor from you, Guruvayurappa, but this time you better understand what I am seeking and why I am seeking. That is the reason, Bhagavane, please destroy all my diseases, not because I want to be relieved of them, but to make me take so deep interest in those Sarira Prayasa towards you, only wastes my time. Instead, I want to focus only on devotion. Therefore, concurrently grant me the devotion of supreme love to you. Whether you grant me through health or without health, I don't care. Just grant me the devotion of supreme love to you. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Narayana 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 Hare